Okay, good morning, Year 8. Today, what I thought I'd do, just to help you out with this work, is just try and record you a little video of me talking through some of the things you're going to be looking at. A little bit different than perhaps just reading it, and hopefully making things just a little bit more clear. So there's going to be a few other little videos as I'm going. So obviously you can pause, you can rewind, you can watch this video as many times as you need. And the idea is you've got some questions to answer, and all the answers I'm going to explain for you in this video. So you just have to listen really carefully and fill out those answers as you go. Okay, so the question we're thinking about today is, why wasn't the war all over by Christmas? Okay, so we already know the war breaks out sort of summer of 1914, and by the autumn of 1914, armies are on the move. They're starting to invade. The Schlieffen Plan has been enacted, and the combat is beginning. Now, what I've got for you on the PowerPoint slide just here are two posters, recruitment posters. These were used at that time to try and encourage lots of people to join the army. Okay, in Britain, try and get lots of people to sign up. Now, what you can probably see from both of these posters is they didn't expect the war to last very long. So let's have a look. So surely you will fight for your king, that's the King of England, and country, so king and country. Come along, boys, before it is too late. So that kind of suggests this isn't going to last long. If you want to fight for your country, you need to get on with it. You need to go and sign up right now, because this war isn't going to last long. Let's look at our other one. Okay. Come, lad, slip across and help. Okay, slip across, suggesting, it's going to be a quick little day trip over to France. Nip over, join the army, give the Huns a good kicking, defeat the Germans, then head home for tea. All right, both of these posters are suggesting that World War One was probably not going to last very long, or certainly that's what people thought. Okay, and you may have heard the expression, this will be all over by Christmas. And that was very much the thinking at the time. People really thought that this war was not going to be long. It wasn't going to last very long at all. However, we know that it did. It lasted for 4 years. It was a pretty damn long war, and a lot of people died. And for a lot of that time, nothing really happened. Nothing really moved. A lot of that war, World War One, was fought pretty much without moving in trenches. No one really made any progress quite some time. So today we're going to look at why that happened. So why did a war that everyone thought was going to be over very, very quickly, why did it descend into what we would call a stalemate? Okay, now stalemate is our key word for today, so I would like you to get this written down. Okay, it's a chess term. Okay, it's what you use in chess. What it basically means is, you may have heard in chess, when you win, it's checkmate. Okay, stalemate means no one can win. Okay, so it means it's in a situation where nobody, in this case, no one can pull off any moves that are going to allow them to win this game. Alright, and it's the same thing, stalemate more broadly. It means you're in a situation where no one can win, but no one wants to give up. No one wants to say, oh, well, never mind then. And no one wants to stop fighting. So that's what we mean by a stalemate. Both sides refusing to give up, but no one's actually getting anywhere. And that is what happens in World War One for quite a long time. So, what we're going to do today, as I say, is we're going to look at the reasons why that was. Why did World War One descend into a stalemate where nobody could get anywhere, nobody could win, no one could make any progress? And there's a couple of reasons for this. Now, I'm going to talk you through those reasons. As I say, there's going to be a few little videos peppered through this that aren't just me talking. You need to listen really carefully and use it to answer those questions. So let's start. So, the first reason it all goes wrong is because the Schlieffen Plan doesn't work. Now, last lesson, you did some work on the Schlieffen Plan, you did it on Seneca, and you wrote some things down as well, but let's just remind ourselves what it was. So essentially, the Schlieffen Plan, it was made in the early sort of 1900s. It was designed to kind of win a quick victory, okay, for Germany, because Germany were very, very concerned. They knew that they had France over to their west, Russia over to the east. What they were very worried about is having to fight two countries at once, fight a war on two fronts, have to fight over here and fight over here. So the Schlieffen Plan was designed to try and avoid that. And the plan was, this is Belgium here, what they figured that Russia were going to be pretty slow, they were going to be pretty rubbish, so what they needed to do was deal with France, get them dealt with, and then they could go and deal with Russia. So the plan was they were going to nip into France via Belgium, use Belgium as a little shortcut, because they didn't think the Belgians would fight back, they thought that would be fine. And the issue is that this bit of the French border, this bit with Germany where they could go in, that was very, very heavily defended because the French obviously expected the Germans to come through this bit. So that was very, very heavily defended. So the Germans thought, let's take a shortcut through Belgium, get in, take Paris, get it all done within 6 weeks, and then we can go and deal with the Russians. So it's a great plan. The trouble is with the Schlieffen plan, it was based on assumptions, and those assumptions were, firstly, that Russia's going to be slow. All right, this whole plan is based around the idea that Russia are going to take at least 6 weeks to mobilise and be ready to fight. Okay, and they figured that gives them at least 6 weeks to get France dealt with. Okay, so that's one assumption. The second assumption is that France is actually going to be quite easy to defeat. So during that 6 weeks kind of grace period while the Russians are getting ready, they can just nip into France, take Paris, job done, all in a few weeks. They also assumed, it was another assumption, that Belgium would not fight back. Okay, that they would be able to pop through Belgium, there wouldn't be any issues. And fourthly, that Britain wouldn't get involved. Now, if you remember, Britain had an agreement with Belgium called the Treaty of London, which was signed in the 1830s, so quite a long time before this, where they said they would protect the Belgians if they were ever attacked. Now, the Germans figured that Britain wouldn't really bother with that, and that actually when it came down to it, they would just leave Belgium to it. They wouldn't get involved. So the Schlieffen plan was based on those 4 assumptions. The trouble is, kind of they were all wrong. All right, all those 4 assumptions were proven wrong, which meant the plan didn't work. So, 2nd of August 1914, after the events of the July crisis following Franz Ferdinand's assassination that we've already studied, the Germans initiate the Schlieffen plan and they invade Belgium. Now, unfortunately, immediately it starts to go wrong because firstly the Belgians fight back, and they actually fight back surprisingly well, given they're a little piddly country and they weren't expected to. And secondly, Britain decide, actually no, they are going to help the Belgians after all. So Britain get over with the BEF, the British Expeditionary Force. They come over from Britain to Belgium really, really quickly. So the Germans, therefore, it takes them a long time to get through Belgium, a lot longer than expected, because they're having to fight off Britain and the Belgians. The other issue is that Russia, forget 6 weeks, they're ready in 10 days. So the Germans have to take away some troops from over here to go and deal with the Russians over in the east. Which means obviously the troops they have over here are less strong because they're missing a lot of their numbers. So, because of that, Germany, they have to kind of give up on taking Paris, obviously the capital of France, they give up on that, and instead they decide to come and attack over here, where the main French troops were. The trouble with that is they get halted at this river here, the River Marne, and they fight something called the Battle of the Marne, and they are unable to make any more progress. So the Schlieffen plan completely fails. It doesn't work at all because of all those assumptions being proven wrong. Britain getting involved, the French fighting back more effectively than expected, and the Russians being a lot speedier than they thought they would be. So the Schlieffen plan goes horribly, horribly wrong, and that is one reason we end up with a stalemate. What happens next is something called the Race to the Sea. So if you remember, we're in a position here where the French and the Germans are kind of having a standoff at the River Marne. Okay, this river here, just to the east of Paris. Okay, now what ends up happening at the River Marne is both sides do something called digging in. They dug in. What that is, well, it's quite literal. It means they literally dug holes, they dug trenches to sit in, basically, to protect themselves, because obviously if you're being shot at, you need some cover. And if you're going to be there for quite a long time, the best way to do that is to make your own cover, dig yourself a trench. So that's what we end up with at the Marne. So some pictures here. Okay, we end up with these trenches, which the troops stand in. Okay, you can see these are German soldiers because of those helmets with the little pointy bits. Okay, so both sides, they dig in to face one another. This is where things start to go wrong. So we've got a little video.
It was a stalemate, with the two sides dug into trenches separated by only a few hundred meters, neither side able to gain the upper hand or willing to retreat. the British and French were suffering an average of 2,000 casualties each and every day of the ongoing battle, which would last for several more weeks, and the Germans were taking heavy losses as well.
So, not going great down here, okay? What we end up doing is we get pushed back a little bit further to this river, which is called the River Ain, and the same situation develops. So, what they decide they're going to do is they are going to try and outflank each other. Now, what we mean by the flanks is those are the sides of your army. Okay, so if you're both facing each other, you're both dug in, neither one can move forward because the other one will stop you. What's a good strategy? Well, let's try and go around the side. We can't go forward, so let's try and get them around the side. Let's try and outflank them, and that is what they try and do. Okay, and there's two reasons for that. Number one being, well, they're both dug into trenches. It's the only way to progress, is to try and get around the side of each other. And the other reason is because they both want to get here. All right, so they want to go round the side, 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 all the way into the port. The reason they want to do that is because they want to control the ports. Okay, they want to control the ports at the sea. Why do they want to do that? Well, what are ports useful for? Bringing supplies, bringing reinforcements, bringing more troops. The Germans don't want the British to be reinforced. They don't want troops coming over the British Channel to help the British, so they want to get those ports first. The British want to stop the Germans stopping them, so they want to get there first. So we end up with something called the race to the sea, when both sides are trying to get around the side of each other to get to those ports first. Okay, just up here. So another little video just to explain that.
Everyone now realized that frontal attacks were suicide, so the armies began to try one of the oldest maneuvers in the history of warfare. They began to try to attack each other from the side, the flank, where an opponent's defenses are much weaker, and he would basically be in a straight line. Now, there were 300 kilometers of open ground between the Ain and the English Channel, open ground that was as yet unravaged by either army. And the new German Chief of Staff Falkenhayn, who very much believed in a hard offensive war, thought he saw an opportunity to envelop the Allied forces in a way that his predecessor, Moltke, was not able to in August. As a bonus, even if he couldn't surround his opponent, if he could take the Channel ports as far as Calais in the west, he would have an excellent strategic advantage. So he began to move. The French and the British armies redeployed to meet this new threat, and they actually did an incredible job of it. So as the autumn rains and cold came on in force, the trench lines grew and grew to the northwest as each army tried to get around the other. The problem now was that neither side was able to attack quickly enough, or especially to bring up artillery quickly enough to seize the day. So further and further they went. This is known as the race to the sea. So at the end of the week, the bloody fighting and continuous shelling in the trenches at the Ain, which heralded the new era of endless, continuous battles, had yet to stop. Both sides were also moving further and further toward the sea, trying to find new ground somewhere, anywhere, between Switzerland and the sea, where they might finally gain a decisive advantage.
Okay, so that process is called the race to the sea. This process whereby both sides are trying to get around each other. You can see on this map here how quickly this moves. So this is where they are at the Battle of the Ain. There's the Marne River there where they started. They kind of push back here. The start of September. We move along as September progresses. We're trying to go. So these guys are here. Then they go round. Then they go round. Then they go round. Then they go round. And so on and so on and so on. And by sort of October, the end of October, we've reached these ports. We've reached the sea. And what that creates is a big long line of trenches, because both sides are digging as they go. So pretty much the whole of northern France ends up divided by that race to the sea. As you can see again just on this map here. Okay, pushing back, trying to get to the sea first, trying to outflank each other. Now, that is another reason that we end up with a stalemate. Because when you've got a front line this long, it's very difficult for anyone to progress, because let's look at what's at either end of it. Okay, so down here we've got Switzerland. Okay, Switzerland is neutral. That means they're not part of the war. So you shouldn't really be attacking them anyway. But even if we ignore that, the other problem with Switzerland is it's very mountainous. It's got lots of mountains. Nightmare to move troops through. All right, trying to take soldiers through mountains is a right pain. All right, so that's a no-go. You can't go through Switzerland. That's not going to work. As we know, up here we're at the sea. So not a lot you can do there either, really. So we've just got this one line. This light brown is the one that we get from the race to the sea. On there, and that front line pretty much is in that same place. That front line doesn't really move for the next sort of 2-3 years of the war. All right, they really are unable to do much once that race to the sea has happened. Now, part of the reason as well that they aren't able to do anything is weaponry, the development in weaponry. So let's talk about what kind of weapons and methods of attack they used at the start. So at the beginning of World War I, the big British kind of tradition, the main sort of unit we like to use, our main method of attack, was the cavalry. Okay, so men on horses. Okay, men on horses charging. That is what we liked to use. We were very proud of it, to the extent that we kind of ignored other technology. So Lord Kitchener, who at this time is kind of the chief of the army, he says 4 machine guns per battalion will be fine. Any more will be an unnecessary luxury. Meanwhile, General Haig, who's going to be quite a big figure in a later lesson, he says at the same sort of time, cavalry will have a larger sphere of action in future wars. So basically, the British Army is very old-fashioned. They're pretty clear that the way to win, the way to fight in this war is using the cavalry. That's not probably going to work very well for reasons we'll look at in just a second. Now, the other thing is new weapons. Right? So it's not just new methods of attack. So previously, the main sort of wars before World War I were the Napoleonic Wars that Britain fought in against Napoleon and France in the sort of 1800s. With those, the main weapon we were using, and this is the same sort of thing we'd be using in the English Civil War that we studied at the start of the year, was something called a musket. All right, so you've got a little gif here of a man using a musket. Muskets, they're a very early form of gun. The issue with muskets is you can only reload them standing up, and they take quite a long time to reload, as you can see. And this guy is a very well-trained soldier, so he's actually doing it very quickly. It would probably take longer than that. You've got to pump the powder in. You see, you have to actually skip some of the process. You've got to shove it in with a thing. You've got to get it all ready to go. So really, you can only fire about 3 times in a minute, and that's if you're very, very good with a musket. So they're pretty slow. You can only use them standing up. They can only sort of accurately shoot for about 100 metres, so they don't have very good range. And the other thing is, because they use powder, if they get wet, they don't work. Alright, so a musket has a lot of limitations. It's not the best weapon ever. Alright, so Britain are going into this war, the generals, what do they know? They know muskets and they know cavalry. Big problem. We're going to watch a clip from a film, War Horse, just to see why perhaps they're quite so wrong and why they realise very quickly.
Good luck, my friends.
On to work! Walk! March! On, captain! Captain! March!
Okay, so we saw there that clearly cavalry charges are not going to cut in anymore. And that is for a number of reasons, and it's mainly down to new weapons. So if you remember before we were using the musket, we just saw the GIF, it was really slow, it was pretty inaccurate, it was pretty rubbish. What we now have, every soldier has a rifle, okay, a Lee Enfield rifle, you can see these soldiers here are using them. Rifles are accurate for up to 1,000 metres, so 10 times the range of a musket. You can fire them lying down, you can reload them lying down. You can see in this GIF here, obviously this is not a World War I soldier, but this man is using a rifle of the same kind. You can see you're able to do it very, very easily. You can fire sort of 10 to 15 rounds every single minute, if you're good. And in fact, some people were even better than that. We get stories from World War I of a really experienced British regiment. People thought they were firing machine guns because they were so quick at reloading their rifles and shooting them again. So rifles, very different kettle of fish to a musket. We've got rifles. The other new thing we've got is, of course, machine guns. Okay, these are a new weapon. Now, we saw a few slides ago the British generals didn't think these were all that good. Clearly, they massively miscalculated there. All right, so again, much like a rifle, a machine gun is accurate for about 1,000 meters. Okay, and it can also fire hundreds of shots every single minute. Okay, so this is a new weapon. It hadn't been used really in previous wars, but World War I is where it really starts to come to the fore. So as you've seen, cavalry charges and just sending your men to walk forward when the enemy's got machine guns, not a great idea. Okay, so we've got rifles, which are much more accurate in lots of ways, and we've got machine guns. The other thing we've got is something called artillery. Now, these are big, big guns. You can see in the GIF here, see in the image here. Okay, these aren't little handheld things. You have them behind your troops. So you've got your troops in your trench. You have your machine gun, these sort of artillery guns, behind them. What they can do is they can fire very, very long range. So they can fire really like a very long way. Okay. They fire these things called shells. Okay, you can see them just in this picture here. Huge, huge, huge exploding kind of bullets. Now, shells are obviously horrible because they're massive explosions, so they can obviously blow you up, they can destroy the ground, and the other thing shells produce is shrapnel. Okay, so what that is they're obviously made of metal. When they explode, little bits of that metal go flying off in all different directions. That metal, if you get hit by a bit of shrapnel, a bit of metal that's exploded out of a shell, it's going to tear you up. Right? It's going to cause horrible, horrible injuries. Okay, so not only are shells dangerous because of the explosive power, that shrapnel is also pretty deadly as well. So there you go, here's some images of some artillery shells being fired. As you can see, those huge explosions, they also make the ground very, very difficult to cross. So let's think about what problems these guys are going to face then in World War I. Well, number one, if they walk forwards, they're going to be shot. They're going to be machine gunned down. They're going to be shot with a rifle. So what do we need to do? We need to protect ourselves. We need to dig ourselves a trench. Okay, so that's why both sides are digging themselves these long trenches to kind of protect themselves, because you can't be out in the open because you will be killed instantly. And as you can see here, so this is a sort of preserved trench that's in France now. You can go and visit. Trenches became pretty complicated, the trench systems. And obviously lots of men would be living in these for potentially weeks at a time, just living in these muddy holes. Okay, so I've got a map here, just of northern France again. You can see there's the River Rhine, that's where we started. That race to the sea and the trench digging that happened afterwards leads to basically two lines of trenches facing each other all the way across France. Okay, now you want to protect your trench so people can't come and get you, so what can you do? You can put a whole bunch of barbed wire in front of it. Okay, and as you can see from this image here, pretty nasty. Barbed wire is very difficult to get past. You need cutters to get through. While you're standing there cutting the barbed wire, they're obviously going to shoot you, aren't they? So that makes it very, very difficult for the trenches to be attacked. So you've got to imagine here, we've got two sides, both in dug holes, both surrounded by barbed wire, both with long-range rifles and machine guns. No one's getting anywhere near each other. Okay, and as you can see here again, it's some more just sort of diagrams. The trench systems could become really complicated. Okay, so you would have your front line, this bit along the front, there's the barbed wire. You would also have reserve trenches, support trenches. At the back, you would have those big artillery guns. So if you look here, this is a sort of aerial view of two sides, trench line, there's your opposing trench line. Now that land in the middle is called no man's land, and as you can see, it's covered in little holes, and those little holes are craters created by the artillery shells. Okay, so remember those are big exploding shells. Well, this is what they do to the land. Okay, so you're sat in your trench, okay, looking out at your enemies who potentially could be less than a mile away in their own trench, and this is what you're looking out at. All right, that is what no man's land looks like after a few months of everyone firing artillery shells all day, every day. It's not going to be looking great, is it? So you can see the mud, because this is farmland essentially, the mud, the rain. Northern France, the weather, not always brilliant, all right, probably lovely right now, but think about how cold and rainy and horrible it's going to get. So it is just a muddy mess, okay, because of all those artillery guns. And you can see here, this is a preserved trench. This is an aerial shot taken quite recently. So you can see there's one trench there, there's the other trench there. This bit would be no man's land, and as you can see, it is completely pockmarked with craters. Okay, and obviously the grass is growing back now, but back in the day, in World War I, when it was actually being fought, it would look like this. Okay, this horrible mess of mud and puddles and trees, and just awful. So very, very difficult for anyone to go anywhere. Right, which is, of course, is partly why we end up with a stalemate, because both sides are just sat in trenches. They can't leave the trench because they'll get shot. Nothing else. It's very difficult to get across, okay, because of all this mess. So no one's really going to progress anywhere. And this is made worse by the fact that both sides are pretty much evenly matched. All right, so we've talked about the Industrial Revolution. Both Germany and Britain by this time, and France to a lesser extent, they've had that Industrial Revolution. They're both pretty heavily industrialised countries, which means they can churn out weapons as much as they need to. So we've got an image here. This is an artillery factory. You can see they're making those big guns in this factory here. Over here, they're making shells for the artillery. They can produce rifles and things as well. So both sides can pretty much just sit in their trench, firing shells at one another, getting more delivered from their home country for as long as they need to, pretty much. All right, so neither side is really better than the other, which makes it, again, very hard for any progress to be made. Okay, so what we've talked about there is all the different reasons why the war became a stalemate, okay, why it wasn't all over by Christmas. Okay, and we've talked about a number of big reasons. Number one being the Schlieffen Plan failing. Okay, that went wrong. That meant that Germany's kind of hope for a really nice quick victory was lost. We've talked about the race to the sea. So when both sides were trying to kind of outflank one another and get control of those seaports, they ended up creating a massive long front line that crossed France, and you couldn't get around it because you've got Switzerland to the south and the sea to the north. And the other thing that we've just talked about in a lot of detail is new weapons as well. So what I want you to do is, when you've written your answers to the questions, okay, the questions that you've got in a Word document, all the answers you need for those are in this video. We've talked about all of them. So you need to try and write your answers to those questions, and when you've done that, I want you to go onto Microsoft Teams. I've created a team for your class, and I want you to post what you think is the main reason it became a stalemate. So what do you think of those things we've talked about? Which one do you think was the most important in meaning that no one made any progress? Okay, so do you think the fact the Schlieffen Plan went wrong right at the beginning, that's why they couldn't get anywhere? That's why it was a stalemate? Do you think it's because of that race to the sea? All right, the fact that the Germans couldn't get around us, they couldn't stop us getting those ports, they couldn't stop more supplies coming, and we could keep going forever? Or do you think it was new weapons? The fact that neither side is really able to progress anywhere because they have to stay in their trenches just in order to survive? Okay, so you've got three things to think about. When you've answered all those questions, I want you to get on Microsoft Teams and write down your answer for me. Which of these three things do you think was most important in creating a stalemate, and why? Thank you. Any questions, send me a message.